Hey, 42 here. I want you to take a look at this chart. 6, 44, 334. This is today. Then, by 2030, we'll be at 2,537. And only 5 years after that, 19,267. What do you think these numbers represent? If you guess data, then get yourself an ice cream. Because this was an estimate made in 2018 of how the total volume of data created by humankind will increase over the next couple of decades, measured in zettabytes. 1 zettabyte is 1 billion terabytes. This paper overestimated slightly. We currently sit at just over 200 zettabytes instead of 334. But that's still an exponential increase from just 6 zettabytes back in 2015. 1 terabyte is enough data to contain about 1 million books. That means, in just 10 years, humankind has generated brand new data roughly equivalent to 200 quintillion books. That's such a large number that it's difficult to wrap one's head around. But if you were to store all of humanity's data on 1 terabyte 3.5-inch hard drives and stacked them in a tower, it would be 3.16 billion miles tall, or roughly 13,000 times the distance from the Earth to the Moon. This unfathomable amount of data comprises mostly video. Although we don't know the total volume of video that is stored, we do know that anywhere from 70 to 80% of all internet traffic is video data. Think YouTube and TikTok. The rest of the world's data is made up from a mix of photos, text data, such as emails and documents, enterprise data, think customer data and corporate records, and scientific data, although scientific data is thought to only contribute about 1% of total data volume. And it's not like they aren't trying. The Large Hadron Collider produces 200 petabytes of data per year when it's running. So far, storage needs for all of this data have mostly kept up with demand. There are currently over 1,000 hyperscale data centers operating across the planet. A hyperscale data center is a category of enormous data center, housing anywhere from 5,000 to 100,000 servers, usually utilized by the likes of Amazon, Google, Microsoft, etc. But each year we're building more and more of these hyperscale data centers. These days, over 100 new ones come online every year. Each one of these mega projects costs hundreds of millions and sometimes billions of dollars to build and operate. But is all of this really sustainable? And how long can we continue to keep up with the demand? It's estimated that up to 90% of all data ever created was made within the last 2 years. And more data will be generated in the next 2 years than in all of human history. We're on an exponential data train with no signs of it slowing down. The emergence of generative AI has only made the problem much, much worse. Life has ups and downs, and we've all experienced it. But I grew up in a very traditional part of the world where men were expected to be tough and not show their emotions. But that approach is rarely helpful and usually leads to more pain. And if that's how you feel, you're not alone. 62% of adults believe societal attitudes discourage people from seeking mental health help. And despite growing up in an era of mental health awareness, 37% of Gen Zers believe those who seek therapy are mentally weak. In honor of Mental Health Awareness Month, BetterHelp is the paid partner of this video, and I'm working with them to stop the stigma around mental health support and encourage more people to help get support from a credentialed therapist. Whatever is on your mind, you might think that it's not okay to talk about it openly or to display emotions, but a therapist is there to listen, ask questions, and help you see things from new perspectives. They can give you advice and techniques to make positive changes in your life. And BetterHelp's mission is to make starting therapy as easy as possible. If you think you could benefit from speaking with a credentialed therapist, click the link in the description below or go to betterhelp.com/42 to match with a therapist. Using my link also gets you 10% off your first month of therapy. And if we just go back to that earlier chart for a moment, the one that predicted that in 2035 we will need to store a mind-boggling 19,267 zettabytes of data, it begs the question, will that even be possible? Considering we're currently at what seems like, in comparison, a paltry 200 zettabytes, and we currently have somewhere in the region of 12,000 data centers worldwide to store all of that. So, to reach 19,267 zettabytes of storage capacity, are we going to need to carpet the entire planet in data centers? Well, obviously not, because as you know, storage technology is ever improving. Today, you can buy a single hard drive that stores 30 terabytes of data. That was unthinkable only a couple of decades ago. Remember, it was only the 90s when the height of storage technology was a floppy disk that held a maximum of 1.44 megabytes. But storage does have its limits. Even if we can keep inventing new ways to ram more data into the same amount of physical space, there exists a fundamental, universal cap on our ingenuity towards this endeavor. And to understand why that is, I need to introduce you to a small Mexican man who was also Jewish, who was also American, called Jacob Beckenstein. After growing up in Mexico City to Polish immigrants, Beckenstein moved to New York, where he studied physics, black holes, entropy, and eventually postulated a concept called the Beckenstein Bound. This is the upper limit of thermodynamic energy, or in our case, data, that can possibly be contained within any given finite region of space. Basically, according to physics, the Beckenstein bound is the universe's hard limit on how much data can be stored within a given area. That limit, which works out to be roughly 10 to the power of 66 bits per centimeter cubed, is astronomically higher than the data density of our current best storage mediums. We're not even a tiny fraction of a way towards that limit yet. So we have a lot of headroom, and I mean a lot. But Beckenstein's bound isn't actually our nemesis here. It offers so much more density than we could ever hope to achieve. So much so that no scientist or engineer is even remotely concerned about it. What does keep them up at night are something called soft caps. Most of the world's data is currently stored on a combination of your run-of-the-mill 3.5-inch magnetic hard drives and magnetic storage tapes. And you may or may not know that at one point, the hard drive industry faced a soft cap on increasing the density of these mediums because they hit something called the superparamagnetic limit. That's when magnetic bits become so small that tiny thermal fluctuations can randomly flip their polarity, which corrupts data. This was overcome commercially in 2005 with the introduction of perpendicular magnetic recording, a different way to arrange the magnetic elements that made them resistant to polarity flipping. But then again, with the invention of flash memory, that's what USB sticks and memory cards use, we hit yet another soft cap. When we started to shrink the transistor cells to fit more data on flash drives, we got to about 20 nanometers, and then electrical interference caused yet more data corruption. It seemed like we had reached some sort of physical limit. But yet again, we solved this with some clever geometry. Instead of stacking the transistors on a 2D plane, we stacked them vertically as well, inventing a new technology called 3D NAND flash, which greatly increased the storage density of flash memory. So it turned out not to be a hard cap, but yet another soft cap. But the more we push the physical limits of these technologies and the smaller we try to make the transistors, the more frequently we're running into soft caps. And sure enough, we've managed to overcome these in the past, but there's no guarantee that will always be the case. There's also, arguably, the bigger issue of data permanence. 3D NAND flash stores data by holding an electric charge, and over time, this charge slowly dissipates. Solid-state hard drives usually last for about 10 years before the data on them fades into entropy and is lost forever, if not backed up. Magnetic mediums, such as traditional hard drives and tape, fare a little better. They have lifespans of 10 to 30 years. And some special optical storage mediums promise 100 years of data retention. But none of these presents the ideal data solution. Eventually, their content will fade into nothing, and there's probably also limits on how dense we can pack data onto these devices, limits that we might not yet be aware of. But what if there was the perfect data storage medium? And what if I told you that it already exists and is in use today? In fact, you already have it in your home. This mystical unicorn of data storage can hold trillions of times more data per square inch than any hard drive on the planet. And, better yet, it retains all of that data for thousands of years. And the best part is that we don't need to invent it because, like I've said, it already exists. And it's actually inside you right now. In fact, it's been with us since the dawn of time. I'm of course talking about DNA. Upon first hearing this, you might be wondering how we could store our mountains of digital data inside DNA, a natural polymer compound that we can't even see with the naked eye. It sounds so science fiction that Marvel could make yet another 20 mediocre films based on the concept. But, in a way, it actually makes a lot more sense than storing data on magnetic hard drives, which is basically witchcraft in comparison to DNA. And the reason why it makes so much common sense is that DNA is a storage medium to begin with. It is Mother Nature's original storage medium. You can think of human DNA as a data bank that stores the instructions for how to make a new version of you. And when I say instructions, I don't just mean black hair, blue eyes. Your DNA contains the blueprint, down to the smallest possible detail, of how every protein folds to create every structure of cells in your body. If you're a programmer, you can think of DNA as assembly code. When a fetus grows in the womb, the DNA contained within the baby's cells already contains all the information that maps out how that child will look in 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 years, and 2 decades. When you cut yourself, your DNA contains the instructions needed for your skin to heal in exactly the right way. The process by which this hard-coded information becomes real-world cell growth is actually rather simple. The DNA information is transformed into mRNA. The M stands for messenger, and it's like an exact copy of a segment of your DNA. This messenger RNA then dictates to the proteins how they should fold by telling them the exact amino acid sequence needed to fold into the 3D structure required, whether that be skin cells or hair follicles. And what's even more amazing is that every cell in nature, without any known exception, contains an almost exact replica of the entire genome of its host. A genome is one full set of DNA instructions, and these are all stored within a cell's nucleus. A human's genome contains 23 pairs of chromosomes, thread-like structures that actually hold the DNA. And since we have now sequenced the full human genome in 2003 after a 13-year effort, we happen to know that the full set of DNA instructions for one standard order Homo sapien takes up 3 gigabytes of space on a computer hard drive. That means that every cell in your body is packing 3 gigabytes of data, and there's about 30 trillion cells in the average adult human. If you do the maths, which don't worry, I've already done them, it means you're walking around with 90 zettabytes of data in your cells. That's just under half the total volume of digital data in the world today, meaning you could theoretically store all of humanity's data inside just 2 humans, if you formatted them first to remove all that pesky human genome data. So, As you can see, the issue is not whether DNA can store data. That's literally why it exists. The issue is how we manipulate DNA to store our digital data. As you probably know, digital data is stored in bits, which can only be one of two physical states, 0 or 1. All known digital data, from your bank account transactions to TikTok videos, are stored in zeros and ones. Lots and lots of them. This is convenient because the mediums that we use to store those bits are well suited to binary states. For example, the magnetic plate on a spinning hard drive is, well, magnetic, and magnets only have two polarities. So as the head moves over the spinning platter, it magnetizes tiny regions of the platter to signify a 1, and what's left unmagnetized represents a 0. DNA, however, doesn't use a binary storage system. Instead, it's quaternary, meaning it has 4 possible states. The fundamental building block of a strand of DNA are nucleotides, which are made from sugar, phosphate, and one of 4 nitrogen-containing bases. These are adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine. Which of these 4 bases each nucleotide is made from determines its state. And when you chain many nucleotides together, you create a code, such as ACGT, AGTA, etc., etc. This is how DNA stores data. There are 6 billion nucleotides in your human genome, and all they are doing is storing a blueprint for you in a simple quaternary system, a unique combination of A, C, G, and T's. Now, converting this code into computer binary is actually rather simple. You just create a simple schema, with each pair of bits representing a unique letter, such as 00 equals A, 01 equals C, 10 equals G, 11 equals T. Then you could theoretically convert back and forth between DNA and digital almost instantaneously. That's not the difficult part. The difficult part is, as you probably guessed, actually storing custom data in DNA. How the hell do you do that? Well, you could just use a DNA printer. I know that sounds utterly ridiculous, but they do exist. DNA printers began development way back in the 1980s, and today they're being used in many labs around the world. They work by artificially synthesizing DNA by printing nucleotides, one at a time. To be honest, it's very similar to how an inkjet printer works. But instead of ink, it prints using sugar, phosphate, and nitrogen. Using such a printer, you could, theoretically, print DNA that stored your entire photo library or a backup of your computer hard drive. And yes, you could do that today. You could then store this tiny fragment of DNA inside an ampule, and it would last a very, very long time. In fact, studies have shown that when stored with salt, which helps its stability, DNA can retain its data for thousands of years. You also don't need any electricity to maintain the data or rely on magnetic fields. In 2012, a team at Harvard used this exact technique to encode and store the first full-length book in DNA. They converted the book's text and images into ones and zeros, then into DNA language, A, C, Gs, and Ts. Then, using a bog-standard off-the-shelf DNA printer, they synthesized 54,898 pieces of DNA, each 159 nucleotides long. The team later sequenced the DNA using conventional methods and were able to once again convert the stored data back into binary and from binary into text and images. In short, the experiment was wildly successful. Then, in 2019, Catalog, which is a startup based in Boston, managed to fit all of the text from English Wikipedia, that's 16 gigabytes, into a single vial of DNA. To achieve this, the team actually designed their own proprietary DNA printer, which was significantly faster. It was able to write 4 megabits per second. So, what's the catch? Obviously there's a catch, or we wouldn't be building thousands of square feet of data centers every year. We'd be building more DNA printing facilities instead. Well, as you might have already guessed, it's money. It's always money, isn't it? DNA synthesis is expensive. Today it costs anywhere from $1,000 to $4,000 per 1 megabyte of data written into DNA. The raw footage of an average 42 video is a whopping 100 gigabytes. That means it will cost me a minimum of $100 million to store just one of my videos in a vial of DNA. Yeah, something tells me I'll be sticking to magnetic hard drives for quite a while longer. But there is hope on the horizon. The cost of DNA synthesis is dropping each year and is expected to fall precipitously over the next few years due to increased competition and rapid improvements in the technology. It isn't just data storage that DNA synthesis is used for, it's essential for the development of cutting-edge pharmaceuticals and is used during the research of deadly pathogens. So there are plenty of startups out there that are chomping at the bit to make the technology cheaper, faster, and more readily available. Just last year, a team in China invented a new technique that increases the speed of writing data into DNA by 350 times. They did this by essentially parallelizing the process using pre-made templates. So instead of writing data one nucleotide at a time, they were able to print hundreds of nucleotides in parallel. They demonstrated this by successfully storing an ancient image of a Chinese tiger into DNA, then reversing the process to retrieve the digital image. DNA data storage sounds like it will be forever locked away in the sci-fi locker. But it's happening right now, and it's improving at an impressive rate. If I said to you 20 years ago that in a couple of decades, millions of people around the world will have a 3D printer in their homes, a machine that they purchased for as little as a couple of £100 that can print solid, highly complex 3D objects in minutes, there's a good chance you wouldn't have believed me. But here we are. I can envision a future, not very far off, where you can order a DNA printer small enough to sit on your desk and for less than the price of a new iPhone that can print vials of DNA storing all your data that will still be intact hundreds of generations in the future. There could even be a future where we store all of our digital data, your photo library, your work and everything else inside your own body, somehow sitting in harmony in your cells beside your biological data. Which opens up a strange dystopia where someone could steal your data by taking your blood. And that would be a very strange world indeed. Thanks for watching.